Welcome, everybody, to the Career Change Champions podcast. I'm your host, Tonya Montella, and today I have with me Gary Bushrod, the head of DEI at Amazon Music. Gary, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me to come.
All right, so I want to uncover a mystery. Now, it's not a mystery to me, but it's a mystery to many people. Background story for those listening. Gary and I go way back. We have known each other for...
I was going to say, I was like, Tanya's being formal, but we've known each other since we were like 15 or 16.
Yes, it has been so long. So he knows my family very well and vice versa, of course. And so anytime they see a post on social media, they're always asking me, what is Gary doing? And oh, he's here now. He's in this other country. And my mom recently asked me, I saw that he was at the Grammys. Was that true?
That wasn't true.
Yeah. Was that true? She says. I said, yes, it was true. So please uncover the mystery for everybody. What is it exactly that you do?
So I was hired for a specific reason, and it's kind of dovetailing into something else. I am the head of DEI for Amazon Music. So ideally, I'm focusing on programs and mechanisms being put in place to make sure that our current talent within Amazon Music is feeling included, and that we are holding on to our retention goals, and that we are recruiting diverse and underrepresented talent and things like that. But there's also an industry standpoint to my job where I am interfacing with labels and artists who happen to be a part of historically excluded populations and establishing possible partnerships with them. And so that example about the Grammys is because we had a program called an immersive program that was in partnership with the Black Music Collective. That it's a subset, and that's my puppy. That's a subset of the Grammys, the Recording Academy. And so they were having their inaugural Recording Academy honors event. And so I went to Grammy Week so that I can attend that. And then, all these events kind of avalanched, and I ended up at the Grammy. So mind you, I went to Grammy Week not knowing whether I was going to the ceremony or not until maybe a couple of days beforehand.
Yeah, and you said you yourself posted the picture of you being in the room with Usher and L.A. Reid, but you said other people just happened to see you from the picture that they also posted on their Instagrams.
Right. So that was from a different event. That was from when we were in Atlanta. I did a little introduction or presentation at the Atlanta Business Music Summit. And it's basically saying that Atlanta, one of the major exports from Atlanta, or number one exports from Atlanta, has always been its music. There are so many, especially in R&B and hip hop music artists that come from Atlanta, but though they come from there, they tend to think they need to move to LA or New York to make their career happen. And so what we're charging, and what L.A. Reid and Jermaine Dupri and the whole, the juggernauts of Atlanta are declaring now is that they're going to start taking their power back in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So I was down there for that event. And I ended up at dinner with like Usher, L.A. Reid, Jermaine Dupri, Division, Sean Garrett, and we took a picture afterwards. It was late at night when we did it, so I said, okay, I'm gonna wait until the morning to post my picture because I need to make sure all my friends are awake to see it. So I didn't post anything. I didn't post anything to my stories and anything like that. But L.A. Reid and Usher both posted it that night. They don't have to wait for algorithms. They're so famous they can post whenever they want and get engagement. And so I woke up, to like at least a couple dozen texts asking me if that was me in the photo and tagging me in the photo. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. So when I talk about, you're here, there, and you're literally everywhere. Part of that is obviously a factor of your job and what it is that you do, but part of it is also your love for travel, right? Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that came to be?
Yeah, it actually started when I was living in Virginia, and I was at Booz Allen Hamilton as a learning experience designer and a facilitator. So I used to travel all across the country conducting training at military bases, mostly the Air Force. And so I got a knack for, or, kind of got addicted to traveling um, domestically that way. But when I moved to New York and realized that New York is one of those places that you can really get flight deals internationally pretty easily or pretty often, I started taking advantage of that. And in 2000, what was it, 2016, I believe, or 15, one of those two, I ended up getting this travel deal to Abu Dhabi for only $189 round trip. And so none of my friends jumped on it. So I booked it anyway, and I ended up going solo. I took a lot of pictures. And then so I started a travel blog because of all the traveling that I was doing. And the funny thing is, I didn't start the travel blog because I wanted to be a blogger. I started it simply because I didn't want to be annoying on social media. I didn't want to be that guy who was always posting pictures and videos and post about me flying to all these different countries. So I decided to put it on a blog so that people can go to the blog and see for themselves when they wanted to. And it just kind of turned into a thing.
And what I love about your blog too is it's not just pictures and stories about your experiences, but you also will give tips on traveling, or you'll plug the equipment, like the luggage that you brought and where you bought it and the deal that you got and things like that. There's that added element to it, which I really like.
Yeah, because people ask me about, they're like, I heard you went to like Egypt. What did you think? I'm lazy. I don't feel like explaining again. I'll just send them to my link, or send them to my webpage. And yeah, and I was also just figuring that eventually I would like to monetize my blog. I haven't focused on it enough to do that yet, but it was great. It's a starting point for me. And yeah, I've enjoyed it so far. I need to actually refresh it, but the pandemic kind of took my focus off of it.
Right. So has your love for travel been a factor at all in your career decisions, as far as the companies you go for, the roles that you look at taking?
Actually, no, because I'm thinking about my last two jobs. JP Morgan, which is a job that I got when I first moved here to New York, and then Capital One, both big banks. I didn't travel really for JP Morgan at all. And for Capital One, I traveled, but it was to McLean or Richmond. Like, it wasn't anything fun. So I really didn't. What's important when I take jobs is that I had the flexibility to go on my own travel. Like, I need to have enough paid time off or flex time so that I can do my own traveling. I haven't really been looking for jobs that involve travel. This one that I am, at Amazon Music, I took the role not really knowing what the travel was looking like. This travel, I mean, mind you, I'm a pandemic hire. So if I took the job in the middle of a pandemic, I really don't know what the world was I didn't know what the world was going to look like post-pandemic. And we're still trying to get out of the pandemic, but traveling is starting to pick up for business. So.
That's interesting in how not only your role has evolved, you were mentioning how it's dovetailed into more of the industry type stuff, but then to your point about onboarding remotely, which is a thing in and of itself, and having the unknown be at the other side of the pandemic, where things are starting to open up now, and how that may or may not affect travel personally or professionally. So that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And it was interesting being onboarded as a pandemic hire, because, mind you, I'm in New York City, but a lot of my team is on the West Coast. Amazon's headquarters is in Seattle. And then by way of Amazon Music, a lot of people are in LA, San Francisco, and then we do have some people in Atlanta. So I was going to be remote anyway. Like, I was not going to be with my whole team. But to be a pandemic hire is kind of like you have to self-service your onboarding. There's a lot of stuff that you have to kind of just research on your own. You're stuck at the computer by yourself. You have no one to kind of lean over to or ask or talk to get the answers you need. So you become a lot more self-sufficient during a pandemic.
That makes sense. So sometimes when we think about, career changes, sometimes those tend to be very deliberate and very strategically thought out as far as what you do next. And sometimes it's just, you're looking for something new and then an opportunity arises and you take advantage of it. So I'm curious what your experience has been. You mentioned a couple. You mentioned Booz Allen and Capital One. So take me back to kind of where your career began. I know you've well, even from the list of those two companies, you've worked in a couple different industries. So where did it all begin for you?
Um, it, it began in finance. So I started off as a financial analyst, and I did not want to do that, but I think that a lot of people know that once you leave college, you just your measurement of success is being able to land a job after college. And so I really didn't care what I was doing as long as it was a full-time job that had benefits. Um, and now in retrospect, I thought I was crazy for what I took, because the job was only like started at $29,000 a year. I don't even know how I was like surviving. I was living at home with my family, but still. And so I was in finance. I would say that for that first few years after college, I was jumping jobs. I was being very much a millennial and leaving jobs after a year for better opportunities. So I never took, even though I had jobs, I never took my resume or my profiles down off of the job sites. I was always looking. And so I jumped a few times, but making marginal advancements in my salary. So for my first few years, money was the number one motivator for me. Like, I need to get my money up. I need to get up there so I can be self-sufficient and like take care of myself. And so, yeah, that's how I kind of ended up at Booz Allen Hamilton, where I really planted my roots for a while. So I came there as a financial analyst, working in the finance department. I don't know if you are familiar with how government contracting agencies work, but you get on a contract, and when that contract is over, you then are open to find something else, another contract within the company. And so there was a time where I was on the beach, is what they say at, or they used to say at Booz Allen. Like, I was on the beach, I wasn't on the contract yet, and I was looking for something else. And I ended up on this training delivery team as just a coordinator. I was all these people on the team were traveling to all these different military bases and conducting training. And I was the one that was kind of at the home base coordinating their schedules and making sure that they were organized and things like that. I asked, because I saw how cool it was for all of them to be traveling. I asked the manager at the time if I could be considered for one of the training roles, facilitator roles. And he said they had nothing open at the time. So I let it go. Well, I didn't really let it go. I learned the material anyway without telling anyone. I learned the training material and kind of studied it myself. And then one of the trainers, I think he's still my friend on Facebook, which is interesting. He ended up quitting, and he had another job. But there was a trip that was coming up really soon to, I believe it was like New Orleans or something, and they needed a trainer to fill in, and all the trainers were already booked. And that's when I rose my hand and told the manager that I knew the material. So I was able to jump in there, and then that was kind of that kind of wrote history for how I jumped into learning and development.
I love that, because you said you didn't let it go. You knew that was something that you wanted to do. And even though the opportunity wasn't yet there, you did the work to kind of upskill yourself in that area, so that when the opportunity did arise, and it sure did, you were ready to step in and say, listen, I've been doing the work, I'm ready to do it. And I think that's
right. And transparently, I was just a little bit underutilized and overqualified for what I was doing. Like, I'm coordinating people's schedules. Like, I have more, I really didn't take that job at Booz Allen to be doing that. And so I had bandwidth to do other stuff. And so I decided to be constructive with it. And so, but while I was in the learning and development field doing that facilitation, I decided to kind of really put 10 toes down and really see if I can change this into a career, so that I wasn't just job hopping. And so that's when I ended up enrolling in George Mason and the instruction and curriculum program, the master's program, so that I can become a credentialed learning and development practitioner. And so that made sense for me. I was 100% remote eventually, because we stopped the travel part, or the facilitation part of the project ended, but we still needed to do the back end work, like creating these online platforms. And so I needed instructional design experience to do that. So while I was working, I decided to go to grad school in parallel with that. So in retrospect, it was crazy, because I'm thinking about the fact that I was working full time. I was doing a grad program, and I was kind of rushing through it. So I was taking more credits than I should have.
Mm.
I was coaching the step team. I was singing with the choir. I was traveling. It was just a lot of stuff that I would never try to do in my schedule now.
Right. You were trying to make it happen. That incremental pay that you were working towards, you were very adamant about that, getting out of that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so since I was 100% remote, I decided to move to New York. When people ask me why I moved to New York, there's no real reason. A job didn't take me here. I was just 100% remote with that job. I asked the manager if I could, relocate on my own dime. So I paid for my move and I moved up here. And then I updated my LinkedIn when I moved here just to make sure it was fresh. I didn't know at the time that when you update your LinkedIn, it kind of sends out like pheromones or like a signal to recruiters that you're available and open for work. At least at the time it did. And so recruiters started hitting my inbox, and I did feel kind of tethered back to Virginia because I still had that job there, even though I was remote. And I was also afraid that it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. Like I wasn't there to be in the rooms for the board meetings, and I wasn't there for the contracts. Are they going to forget about me, or are they going to be able to staff me on other projects moving forward? So I started considering things here in New York, and I really didn't feel like I was a New York resident until I landed the JP Morgan job that was based here in New York City. So it was a good, interesting turn of events, and it all happened within a couple of years because I got my degree in 2014 and I moved to New York a few months after I got my degree. So,
And so, what I'm just curious, what piqued your interest about facilitation and learning and development, instructional design, all that stuff? Because going from financial analyst to that, right, is very different.
Yeah. It sounds really superficial, but the reason why I got into learning and development is just because I wanted to travel to the sites. My highlight was I got to go to these different cities, and I just happened to be teaching something while I was there. So I would do my work. I would go to the Air Force bases and conduct the 6 to 7 hour trainings for the people who did not want to be there and did not want to be learning. And then I would leave and do my thing. It wasn't until I started thinking about the back end and instructional design and actually making online courses that I started really taking a liking to the field. It's because I have taken so many boring online classes, or sat through so many boring instructor-led classes. What could I do to add some kind of flair to this and to make it a smart learning situation? So that's when I kind of decided to become credentialed in it. And also I was just kind of tired of jumping jobs. I was like, now that my business management degree has done good for me so far. Like I've been generally out in the corporate America field, but what am I going to start doing with my career? So I thought at the time learning and development was going to be it, not knowing that it could be a gateway into some other things at the time.
Mm-hmm. So we're not yet at present day just yet in your journey. So I'm curious to reflect on what you've shared so far, between, taking the initiative to kind of learn the training materials that needed to be learned to do the job of the facilitator role that you wanted to go for, and then taking the initiative to go and getting your master's to really double down on that effort. As you think about that whole journey, what were some of your key learnings or takeaways from your experience, as far as like things you think through, or things that you would even tell others as they navigate career change?
With career change, I would say that you want to make sure that you are kind of, I use this analogy all the time that Tyra Banks used. I don't know if it was on Top Model or her talk show, but she was talking about how when you go to a buffet, you don't go up the first time and just stack your plate with all the stuff or whatever. You go up there and you kind of just take small samples from each of the things you think you like, go back to your table and eat. And the stuff that you really like from that first round, that's when you go back and start piling on. I think it's important to do that in your career. When you make your decisions for what you're going to major in, if you go to college, if you make your decision then on what you're going to major in, who's to say the decision you made when you were 17 or 18 is going to be what you want to do for the rest of your professional career? It's important to try new things. So while I'm working now in a full-time job, it's important to me that I'm still tapping into that travel bug that I have, and writing, podcasting and speaking engagements and stuff like that, just to figure out, am I scratching the itch that I have? Am I 100% tapped into what I really want to be doing or what I'm passionate about? And then go from there. While you're spreading your wings and doing all these different things, you're building experience in those fields. So it's great to put on your resume. You're going to be able to speak to that when you're interviewing for jobs. You're not going to go into these jobs cold, with a cold start. You'll have some kind of footing under you because you've tried it before.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you talk about, finding the things you're passionate about, I'm curious, and obviously this is a snapshot in time because it changes throughout our lives, but present day Gary, what are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about making sure people who look like me and are like me, part of underrepresented or historically excluded groups, are not don't have to deal with the stumbles or the roadblocks that I've had in my career. I was thinking about this last night as I was writing for this magazine. I guess fun fact: this magazine that I'm going to be a part of soon is like I had some roadblocks in my career. I saw my peers who are part of dominant groups, like namely white, who were kind of doing mediocre work or just standard work, meets expectations, but they were getting promoted or they were getting the projects that were bigger so that they could get promoted and things like that. And I always felt like I was at the cusp of a promotion or at the cusp of getting something big and making that big break, but it was always me falling on my face right beforehand. And I was kind of eating that up for a while, thinking it was just me. And some of it could have been me, but I've come to realize that a lot of it was systemic. And so I'm looking to be that conduit or that vehicle for kind of making sure that doesn't happen behind me for the generations below. Mind you, the generations that come behind us, they're a lot less tolerant of the things that we were tolerant of coming up and what our parents were tolerant of. So they might not need as much help, but I'm certainly here to help them.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. It's so true. If only we had the awareness and the mindfulness that the generation coming up now does, that'd be great.
Right. They're not afraid to challenge things. I think that the only criticism I have is that I want to make sure that they do the deep dive or the research related to their challenges so that they can demonstrate the findings and support their reasoning for changing structures, and keeping in mind that inclusion does in fact include older people. So you don't just throw out the older people for the sake of empowering the younger people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as we reflect on, our own experiences and we think about underrepresented groups, I'm curious, from Black woman to Black man who has navigated career changes throughout our lives to date, and I'm sure there will be more to come. When you think about your own experiences, and obviously the advice you have already shared and advice that you're probably getting ready to say is applicable to every group, but I just want to take a moment to talk to, the groups of people that are more like you and I. What advice would you give to underrepresented professionals who are either contemplating a career change or in the midst of navigating one themselves?
I think, and it sounds very cliche, but the summer of 2020 was a turning point, and at least in the United States. I think that oftentimes people have commercialized the George Floyd murder and that situation and how it shook the country. But I do think that it spawned into an era where Black people can and should feel more empowered to be themselves and to say what they're really thinking, and to fight for what they think they deserve. And so oftentimes I think that the advice that I've gotten that is, it was understood at the time, but in retrospect, I don't really subscribe to it, is our parents or our parents' generation would just kind of tell us to keep our head down, do the work, do what you're supposed to do, and stay there. And that's why they're at jobs for like 30 years, and
Mm.
you'll move up to the role that you want to be. Eventually, you'll be a senior manager after 12 years instead of just a manager, and that's just not how we operate. Or how at least I operate, and I think that the people after me, or Black people in general, I would say be your authentic self. Like, number one, take care of yourself. Your self, your health comes first. So we're in a world where we're working. I don't know if you're working 100% remote or if you're hybrid. You are inviting people into your homes, really, especially if you're on video. It's going to take more energy to kind of compartmentalize your life. And so I try not to do that anymore. Like, if I have an appointment, or if I am, Black men will get our haircut every 2 weeks or every week. It's on my calendar. Like, I have no problem telling white people that I'm going to get my haircut so that I don't look crazy on video. And I think that, I think that people could just be themselves now. I say that, and as I say that out loud, I know that it's coming from a place of privilege, because I'm at a certain point in my career where I'm not afraid at what people might do or what they'll say if I'm being myself. And people who are more junior might have more of an issue than I do. But it's something that you want to still actively work toward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what you just said is so important to just communicate, but also be aware of is we ourselves as people of color, like, we also have our own privilege, because I think people tend to think of, oh, privilege is just tied to white privilege, and then there's the defense that pops up with that naturally. But whether
No, that's class privilege.
Exactly, class privilege. Yeah, it goes in a number of different ways. So everybody has a different type of privilege. So I acknowledge the fact that you were able to acknowledge your own in that moment. That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see, where do we leave off? You're in New York at this point. We haven't even gotten, we still haven't gotten to present.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's funny because I worked at 270 Park Ave, I believe. This was my JP Morgan work address, and that building has been torn down since, but or 277, one of those two. I happened to land an interview with Capital One, and Capital One was literally next door to JP Morgan. So I took the phone interview while I was at work during my lunch period, and I walked across the street for my full panel interview. I went on a long lunch. And it's funny because I wore a suit to the interview, and it's just funny thinking of that in retrospect, because I don't know the last time I would have wore a suit to an interview for the kind of work that I do. But I ended up not getting that job. I think it's because they ended up hiring someone who had a previous relationship with the hiring manager or with the client group. And so she made more sense for them. So I interviewed in like October of one of those years and did not get the job and kind of let it go. But one of my pro tips is that when you're interviewing with anyone, a hiring manager, or a panel, even the recruiter, it's good practice to friend them or connect with them on LinkedIn, so that you are, number one, you can stay in contact. But if you're not chosen for a job, you by you posting on LinkedIn or by you being connected with them on LinkedIn, it can raise their alert later on if another role comes available that they think you'll be a good fit for. And that's exactly what happened. Is I didn't get the job, but I was connected with all of them on LinkedIn, and the recruiter happened to think about me when another role similar to the one that I already interviewed for was open, supporting another client group. And so she reached out to me. It was a learning and development role. I think at the time we were called client managers, but eventually our name changed to learning consultants. And I was supporting the commercial bank of Capital One, creating trainings for them, whether they were in-person instructor-led classes, or they were programs, or they were online trainings. I was doing all of that. And I was doing that for a few years. And it was cool. I saw there the same issues that I had earlier in my career. I was seeing people who were my peers who were not necessarily doing the best work, but they were getting the opportunities to be promoted. I was up for promotion at one point, and I didn't get it. My manager, who was working to get me promoted, he ended up leaving and going to another team. And so that was me losing kind of a sponsor because he wasn't there to pound the table for me in those promotion meetings. I didn't get the promotion. I let it go. Well, no, I say I let it go. I moved forward. I did not let it go.
You never let it
go. Yeah, I did not let it go. I felt like Jimmy early on Dreamgirls when he was just pissed in that scene where he saw someone else doing his stuff and he was pissed.
You would.
Yeah, I'm thinking about his straight face. I was Effie White. Actually, they were just, it was frustrating. And so what I did was I knew that I wanted to start advocating for people who were going through. I wanted to advocate for myself, but I wanted to advocate for others who were dealing with the same issue. So I joined this culture of belonging group within Capital One, where I was doing my learning and development stuff, but 25% of my job was me participating in this group, this program. I think it was 9 months. But it was an interesting time because once I joined that program, the following couple of weeks, we got hit with the pandemic. So we had to totally change and be 100% remote. I was stuck in my studio apartment down in Brooklyn, which was a lot smaller than the apartment I'm in now. And think about it, that happened in March. The George Floyd killing happened in that summer. And so it was just interesting going through the DEI work and really getting in touch with myself and feelings and bringing those to the forefront and using that to fuel the teachings that we were doing. But it was just also kind of frustrating to see people who are part of identity groups that are dominant, like white people who were all of a sudden crying on video. Like, why are you crying on video? This is not impacting you. Like, welcome to the fight. I'm happy you're here now, but we've been kind of dealing with this forever. It was just an interesting time to kind of be in that work. And so because of that, I was like, I was losing focus on the learning and development side. I no longer cared about developing trainings for credit professionals. Like I could give, I don't know if you can cuss, but I did not give a damn about creating a program for credit professionals. Like, I don't want to do that. I need to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or belonging. I applied to a couple DEI roles within the company because I still loved, I think, Capital One in general, but I didn't want to do the work I was doing. So I applied for a couple of DEI roles and did not get those. They ended up hiring, I think, external people for one of the roles, and then someone else who was a little bit more senior than I for another role. And it's interesting because had I got the promotion that I deserved, I would have been senior enough to get the role that I applied for. So it was just kind of a trickle effect. I went to Mexico on vacation that November, and one of my close friends who worked at Amazon called me there and asked me if I was willing to take an interview for a diversity and inclusion role at Amazon. And so I said yes. I actually started preparing for the interview on the trip. That's funny. I couldn't even focus. I was like, yeah, this will be huge. Not just because it's the work that I actually want to do, but it was also a huge pay increase while I'm playing. And so I started taking notes. I went to like one of the stores. I started taking notes. Like, all these are notes.
Oh my God. Wow.
And it's just a few pages.
Oh, just a few.
Yeah, all these.
Oh my God.
And I was watching YouTube videos. I was just over preparing for the interview. So I got that call from him in November. I went through all the interview process and had the offer in hand 2 days before Christmas that year. And so that's how I got into diversity and inclusion 100%. And it's funny because when I left my last job during the exit interview, they were like, well, what could we have done to have kept you? I was like, give me a job and give me one of the jobs I applied for. What is the problem? What do you mean? What could we have done? So I left, and I was leading leading diversity, equity, and inclusion for the ads, music, and IMDb business for Amazon Music. I was really excited to work with them. and namely the media portions of that. So music and IMDb were just like, I was interested to see how DEI would work there and how I could make a difference there. And eventually, because of the relationships that I formed and kind of wanting to double down into the music work, I was tapped to just be the single threaded leader for Amazon Music. And so I had that happened in November of 2021. So it's only been a few months, like since I've been full time with Amazon Music, and it's been fun.
Wow. So I'm sure there's a number of things that come up when you think about the role that you have now and all the things that you enjoy about it. But I'm curious, what's at the top of that list?
I think being a culture shifter is important for me. Like, I want to make sure that I'm shaking the table and changing the status quo when it comes to how people feel like they belong, and how we are kind of making sure that we're creating an environment where everyone is thriving. And because, I mean, you and I are connected on social media, so you know that essentially I become a branded ambassador for Amazon Music or whoever I'm working for at the time. And I want to make sure that people who are working for Amazon Music are proud to do so. And are not just there to get the check and things like that. And I want to make sure that they can be brand ambassadors and that they feel like they're authentically taken care of and that they are looked after and that they feel like they have equal footing to succeed. And so I like diving into that, the anecdotal data. Like, I like hearing stories of people who have or testimonials of people who have been thriving at Amazon Music. And I like hearing feedback on some of the programs that I've developed or have the trainings that, because I'm still doing training. I'm just doing training now for things that I actually care about. I like to hear feedback directly on how that impacted them, what they enjoyed about the conversation, how we can take that conversation further. I think that the work that I'm in allows for real-time feedback a lot more, and allows for feedback that I actually can take to heart and actually care about and really think on and figure out how to improve. Again, when I'm thinking about credit training or any, even stuff, the training that I was doing for the military, I'm disconnected from that. Like, I have no connection to that training stuff that I'm delivering. I'm just doing it to earn my check. And I feel like now I'm actually doing something that I can be proud of, number one, but number two, that it's ultimately going to impact me and my belonging as well.
That's so interesting, because when you think about like your path from learning and development and all that into the work that you're doing now and how that's weaved in, but it's got such a deeper impact, and it's bringing you, I'm gathering, much more fulfillment because you're able to still do that work, but you're doing it for such a larger purpose.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that that's so interesting how you kind of took what you've done before, but evolved it in such a way that's more impactful. And like I said, bringing you more joy in your life.
Yeah. And I will say that it can be overwhelming at times, because you have to think about the fact, number one, it can be overwhelming because right now I'm a team of one. I'm sure that would, as my remit grows, that team would be growing. But it's also, I mean, think about it from the Black woman's standpoint. If I'm doing DEI work, I'm also someone who's a part of these populations that are underserved and historically excluded. So if there is a killing in the world, in the country, and it's a part of a group that I'm a part of, or someone who looks like me, not only am I going to need to create a safe space for people to be able to process it at work and get their work done, but take care of themselves, I'm going to need to do that myself. Like, I need to internalize or process what I'm feeling before I can help others. So it's kind of like when you're on a plane, you put your gas mask on before you can help others. And it's interesting when you think about DEI work, it's very rare that you'll have somebody, at least at prominent or big companies, it's rare that you'll have someone who is a part of all dominant groups in that. So it's rare that you'll see a straight white man who's doing DEI work. And mind you, not to say that they are not champions for, because there are a lot of people who are part of dominant groups that I work with now who are not in DEI, but they are champions for getting this done, and they're doing all they can do to get it to help us get it done, but they're not officially in the work. So essentially, I would say a good portion, maybe 90% of people who are in the DEI field are part of groups that need to process their own traumas or their own misgivings before they are able to help others.
Mm. So when you say that, it makes me think of, like, when I think of my dentist, I always wonder, well, who works on your teeth? Or my
Exactly.
chiropractor, who adjusts you? So who is who is helping you work through that stuff, or are you doing it on your own?
It's people who are in DEI, who've been doing DEI work longer than me. So my manager for the first several months at Amazon, um, she's like super, I don't want to use the word woke. She's super conscious, and not just conscious. She is credentialed in her work. Like, she knows what she's talking about. She's a proven track record with how to work things out. There are times that I would come to her with something simple that I'm working on, and her name is Angel, because I'm sure she'll probably listen to this. There are things that I'll come to her that she's working on, and she's way more senior than I, but she's able to break it down in a way that, number one, is understandable to me, but really makes me think outside of the box that I'm in. I remember I asked her something one time. I forgot, it was really high level, and she was like, "Yeah, that probably relates back to Jim Crow." I was like, "Oh, you're probably white." And she's not Black. She's I think, Mexican American woman, living out in Washington, in the Seattle area, and she knows her stuff. And so I like to go to people like her who are more seasoned in this work to help me with things. But also, I will say that my team that I'm on, her included when I was on her team, but also my current team at Amazon Music, they're really big on take time that you need. Like, we're not doing brain surgery here. If you need some time to process something, or you need some time off, like I had a bad day last Friday. I was just in a bad mood and wasn't happy about something. And I just messaged my team like, "Hey, it's a nice day here in New York. I'm going to take off for the rest of the day." It was like 2:30 my time, maybe 3 o'clock. I was like, "I'm going to take off for the rest of the day. If you need me, I can be reached on Slack or text. Otherwise, I'll be offline." And they're big on that. I really do empathize with people who are working for companies who have not started opening up their ways of taking care of their employees. So people who have to be in the office every single day, no matter how they feel. I empathize with that. People who have to be on video all the time with no kind of questioning or no flexibility there. I empathize there, because you having to put that face on all day is just not healthy, and it takes a lot more energy to do that than it should.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I mean, granted, I'm only speaking from my experience with, over the pandemic, but at least from my perspective, I'm observing a lot of companies changing in that way, where before something like what you said would been very frowned upon, and now it's like, yeah, absolutely, do whatever you need. Or family matters, like, yep, of course, I totally get it. Like, some companies have always been that way, but I'm noticing a turn in the ones that weren't, because the pandemic really opened their eyes to, like, yeah, listen, people need to take care of themselves. This is not
right. And maybe they're dealing with themselves. And it's funny because a lot of times, like, these CEOs will be like, "I want everyone to come back in the office." And it's easy for you to say that, big shot. You are a billionaire. You are in your cushy house with your nanny or people taking care of your kids. You're going to get your personal driver, to pick you up and take you to your cushy office. You being in the office is not the same as us fighting traffic and needing to be there to go sit in our cubicles and to feel like we're being watched all day. It's not the same. So I'm always turned off when it's a top-down mandate from the richest people trying to tell everyday workers they should be in the office 100%.
So true. Well, it's been a joy, just not only from the outside looking in, watching your journey, and you and I have talked about it along every step of the way, and vice versa. I've talked to you about mine.
You hear the real, like, yeah, I put stuff on Facebook and social media, but you and I will be in the DMs like, it's really what's going on.
This is the real deal. Yes. But it was great to also just hear it laid out. You know, we've talked about it along the way, but we've never sat and really like looked at the big picture. I don't know if you've ever even done that at all.
Not really. I haven't laid it out like I did today. Like I've always talked about it in pieces. But there are just a couple things that are coming up that are having me kind of reflect on it. And as you know, I mean, I think on my social media, I use the hashtag water cooler chat anytime I'm talking about work. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remove that veil that we've kind of been raised in. Like our jobs need to be a secret. I remember when I was working at JP Morgan, it was like I was there for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years before I even put on my social media that I worked at JP Morgan, because I never wanted people to know, like it's supposed to be a secret. And I was going by what the older people were doing. Like, you know, that needs to be separate. But we work, 40 plus hours a week. That is a good portion of our lives. Yes. I think that it's almost unhealthy to act like that part of our lives doesn't exist. Or to only put the great things. Like you'll see me post about the Grammys or going to Atlanta and hanging out with these people, the cool things, but I'm also going to post on there real high level, at least when I'm pissed off or I didn't have a good day at work or I didn't get something that I was expecting. I'm more prone to do that as well. And I'm hoping that I can make that more natural for other people to do it. Because again, we have just been, what is it called? Conditioned or primed to keep that, because we're always thinking about retaliation. So it's always like, yes. If I say something stupid online, is it going to come back to bite me? Well, maybe just don't say something stupid online. So I'm very conscious of the stuff I say. Like I, as Wendy Williams used to say, sometimes things are kitchen table talk. You don't say those things publicly. If I don't know if you noticed that I don't speak a lot about music artists anymore because I'm in the field. And if I was to say something, God forbid it gets back to them, and they're like, the DEI guy over at Amazon Music said this about me. Yeah. So there's certain things you don't need to put online. When it comes to people following me on my social media or on Instagram, I used to be a hard no. You cannot follow me on Instagram or Twitter or anything. And it's mainly because if I was playing hooky, I don't want you to know that I'm playing hooky, like I'm not working. But now I'm not playing hooky. If I'm off, I'm off. I don't care. Yeah. If you want to follow me and you want to see what I'm doing when I'm off, I'm at the beach or I'm in Egypt, climbing under these pyramids, get into it.
Right. Enjoy these pictures. Yes.
Yes. It also lets people know that you have a life outside of work, which is important for them to know.
Exactly. Well, you're living that authenticity that you're suggesting other people do. So you're leading by doing. Well, it's funny because you mentioned, following you on Instagram, because I was going to ask you, do you even want people to follow you? Because my next question is, how can they? Yeah,
they can. I gotta get my followers up. So it's Catch G If You Can, which is also the name of my blog, catchgifyoucan.com. But it's the letter U, not the word you. So catch the letter U. Catch G, letter U, if you can.
Yep. Got it. Okay. Well, we'll be watching it. I will be too. And you and I will have the conversations on the side.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.